Hey guys, in this video I want to talk about the Evasive lance manus. So let's check some of the issues that these kind of builds have, the strong points of Evasive builds, the difference in damage between the common meta and the Evasive one, and finally the respective builds. So the first big issue about this kind of builds is that they are skill intensive, because we are dependent of evade window, which is going to be the core of the build. Believe me, without this thing it's almost impossible to avoid attacks, and even with it, it is quite hard to avoid some of them or even impossible. According to some tests, without any level we have 4 frames or 0.13 seconds of invincibility, and with each level our invincibility window increases 1 frame, until we reach 9 frames, which is translated to 0.3 seconds. In experience, what I can tell you is that the minimum amount I recommend is 3, 0.23 seconds. Anything lower than that, believe me, it's really hard to execute, because depending from monster to monster and among them, their attacks. Even when in theory you have avoided some attacks, there's an invisible hitbox that ruins your gameplay. And that is not like you're using your shield to reduce the incoming damage. Once you have committed to that little hop, it is either avoided or being guarded. And sometimes I look at it one guard point, it's a bit hard. Luckily for the lance we can use insta-block and anchor rage. As soon as we are not fighting something that has multi-hits, they are solid options to avoid damage. And the cool thing is that once we have used them against some attacks, it doesn't matter if the attack leaves a trace of invisible hitbox. Another potential issue with elements is a status trigger and offensive guard. They have the same effect window. Of course, if we use status trigger 3, which believe me, if you're using poison, it is really helpful, because you can keep poison up the whole battle. And that's an issue because with this new update, we have build-up boost, basically another offensive guard. Using the Evasive lance effectively is way harder than playing the normal lance, because with the common way of playing, we rely a lot in guard or insta-block. However, for the Evasive lance, as it is skill intensive and several times those skills require evasion to be activated, it requires a good chunk of knowledge. Basically, you need to know the monster really well. In summary, those are the issues. Now, what are the strong points? Currently, we have a skill named Blade Scalehorn that recovers 20 hits once we have avoided one attack. It is not that much, but if you have nailed the kind of moves that you can avoid, you won't need to sharpen your weapon anymore. And there is a specific build that benefits a lot from this kind of gameplay. For ailments, they are really easy to proc. If we capitalize in a status trigger, you can proc over and over, almost with anything. The specific ailment that gets the best benefit is poison, because you can make the foray useful almost in 100%. Or at the very least 70% if you are not that skilled to keep poison up. Once you have nailed down every attack the monster has, you can synergize so well insta-block and evasions here and there, being able to make some weird builds work. I will summarize those as the best points. The difference in damage is a bit subjective depending how strict we want to analyze this whole mess, because let's take for example one of the builds that is categorized as current meta. It deals 243, but that is without adding some other skills, which can be accomplished with curious crafting. And just because of that, there are several opportunities to improve or modify each build. If you're playing the PC version, you can pretty much do whatever you want. However, in some of my worst experience, I had to reroll the Omnius Ashiko around 80 times to get the third weakness exploit. And if we do that with every single part to get the most perfect build, I guess we will have to farm like there's no tomorrow. For example, I am happy every time I get a slot upgrade, because those can potentially work for several kind of builds. However, sometimes it is not really needed to increase the slots if we end up using a tier 2 in a tier 4 slot. And just because of that, we could say that every single build can be optimized in their own respective way. Most of the builds I made can reach 249 damage without that much issue, so I'll leave this particular point for those who are speedrunners and want to analyze every single little detail. The future of the Evasive lance looks a bit bright. It's hard to execute, but once you nail it, it is worth it. I'll show the builds in a kind of fast way because the elemental ones have the exact same build. It changes for a really specific case scenario, ailments. All the basic builds rely on an 80 to 90% affinity without considering agitator. I am also using embolden, which is like having a guard point, and we require less hits to activate the agitator. And as an added bonus, our evade window is increased for better results. If you have some issues while using these builds, you can switch that critical element 2 for a hard defense ++4. That can actually be a good starting point if you really want to learn this kind of gameplay. In all of these builds, I am relying on blade scale hone as our main way to sharp our weapon. So you need to be proactive with this way of playing, because we have some weird weapons here and blade scale can potentially have them sharp the whole battle. And now for the really specific builds. About poison. The main issue that I had with Ouroboros lands was keeping the monster poison. Seems like those 9 extra points from the Datro lands make the difference in the long run. However, you can be much more consistent, then Ouroboros is a better option because of those extra 10 points in affinity. That of course in my convoluted build, but for much more consistent results, you just have to change those decos. And for the best version of Dragon builds, you will require this freaking Lucky Charm, otherwise you'll need to patch with specific Euros upgrades. But here the cool thing is making Grinder useful for those really specific builds. I hope you find this video useful, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.